Here's what I call the bad isekai test. 1. Could your protagonist be replaced with anyone else and have basically exactly the same story? And 2, would your story be basically the same if the isekai element was removed? If the answer to either of these questions is yes, it's a bad isekai. Here's why Ascendance of a Bookworm passes this test with flying colors, while ReZero fails interestingly. And I'm sorry if you're a fan of ReZero, but I think it's more productive to shit on something people actually like, rather than an easy target like Sword Art Online. And this is gonna sound really stupid until you watch the whole video, but I think ReZero is both very terrible and really well written at the exact same time. So just bear with me for a sec as we sacrifice it to the altar of literary analysis.
Oh, please don't let me die, waiting for your time.
So the Isekai in Ascendance of a Bookworm, Mine, isn't your run-of-the-mill weeaboo stand-in unemployed chronic masturbator. She's simply a girl that likes books. We know exactly 2 things about her: that she loves books, and that, before dying, she prayed to God to be reborn in a world filled with books. And the first thing we learn about this world is there are no books. Oh! Better luck next time, weeb! The reason this works is because literally everything we know about Mine is relevant to her isekaiing because it A, sets up a problem for her to solve, and B, orients the story around solving this problem. Compare this to Subaru, who is just carrying cup noodles like... amazing. Just amazingly relatable. Amusing, sure, but we're literally not given a reason to care about why he's part of the story. Don't get me wrong, I don't think this is a bad setup. In fact, I think the first few episodes are easily the strongest part of ReZero. But why Subaru? Why is he there? I'm not saying we need to know his life story, but nothing that happens ever has anything to do with him, and none of the details we're given about him have even the slightest relevance to the plot. Their only function in this story is to make him even more of a blank everyman for the weeb audience to project themselves onto. His tracksuit, his cup noodles, even his most significant connection to the real world, his cell phone, are completely forgotten about after the first few episodes, only being used for a few cheap gags and then completely ignored. We'll come back to how this affects the story overall, but for now, just keep this in mind. In Ascendance of a Bookworm, everything we know about Mine is relevant to her goals as a character. We know literally 2 things about her, and the second one is basically just the first one again. Same with the world. Me wants books. No books. This is exactly what was so good about Sword Art Online, the good part, I mean. Kirito wants to be there. This is a game he's been looking forward to forever. Suddenly being stuck there is a complete perversion of this desire, and he's forced to adjust to a new reality. And when everyone else is scurrying about trying to fix it, Kirito realizes that for the time being, this is their reality, and if they're going to be stuck there, they should at least take the time to stop and smell the roses now and then. It's honestly fucking profound. Mushoku Tensei is the one that gets away with this because the protagonist is so hopeless and depraved that the living hell is no longer the world he was living in, but he himself. His new world's a beautiful place, but he's afraid of it. He's afraid of going outside. For him, it doesn't really matter where the story takes place because the thing he needs to conquer is himself. So it handily passes the bad isekai test because the story is never at any point about the world he's in.
No, don't give up on life, this and less better.
So all of this is to say that Ascendance of a Weeaboo is a great anime for one simple reason. It does a really good job of getting you to care without bogging us down with details or any of the inconsistencies consistent with isekai. Me want books. No books. Sure, her above average education kind of helps her on her journey, but she doesn't really give a fuck about any of that. Her isekaiing is strictly misfortune because the only thing she ever thinks about is books. And so being transported to a world without books is her own special kind of hell, and the only way out is to make her own books. But even then, no matter what she does, it's never going to live up to her dream of becoming a librarian because the kind of writing and literature we have is literally hundreds of years beyond anything in this world. And a lot of isekai seem to forget this, that the isekai world should never be somewhere the protagonist wants to be. This is again why the beginning of Sword Art Online is so profound. Kirito doesn't want to be there, but while everyone else is scrambling to escape, he recognizes the value in enjoying life for what it is, because if you think about it, what is reality anyway? It's literally just whatever your brain tells you is real, and for the people trapped in SAO, life in Aincrad is their reality, and if they can't at least enjoy it, then what's even the point of living? This is also exactly why Sword Art Online fails so fucking hard basically immediately after this. So now let's go back to talking about the world, because the other thing that Flight of the Weeaboos gets really right is how Mind's isekaiing affects everyone around her. What really connects the whole plot together is this niggling feeling that something is wrong with her. Of course, she's happy to chase her dream of reading books, but something in the back of our minds is very wrong, because that's how everyone else feels. They don't feel any malice from her. She's kind, hardworking, and generous. And yet, she's wrong. She doesn't belong. But because no one knows why, and especially because she's so good and so kind, no one's able to consider this beyond a faint suspicion. Ryutsu figures it out, but he can't bring himself to hate her because whoever this girl is, she's still his friend. Don't get me wrong, this anime isn't for everyone. I mean, the idea is that her not belonging is a niggling idea shoved to the back of everyone's minds and just waiting to emerge into an actual problem, so calling it slow is maybe a bit of an understatement. But it's the good kind of slow, a gradual burn as this mystery unfolds. What will everyone do once they're confronted with the unavoidable, unimaginable truth about who Mine really is? And I'm not gonna say she's a perfect character. Personally, I think she's a little cringy with the way she does the chibi shit with the little internal dance, but here's the thing. Even though she's kind of cringy, I still cared about everything that happened to her. Whereas in most anime, not just ReZero, there's like a lot of fucking meaningless bullshit packed in there for fanservice and whatnot, whereas all of the bullshit in Ascendance of a Weeaboo is merely an extension of Mind's singular focus as a character. Me want books. No books. So, despite being kind of slow, what it does do stands out so much that it encourages you to sit through it all. Because what it does do is get you to care about what happens, so you're willing to sit through her life as she slowly gets closer and closer to her remarkably banal dream of reading books. Even after we get to the scene teased in the beginning where the High Priest peeks into her mind, I'm not gonna spoil what happens, but you know what we learn about her? You know what we learn? That she really fucking loves books. Oh shit, fucking crazy! So while in ReZero it's a lot more exciting and there's a lot more going on every second, I never got the sense that any of it actually matters because it never gives us a reason to care about Subaru. He's just there. Why is any of this happening? Why is it happening to him? The story just goes in circles. So now let's talk about ReZero and what it does very right and how, paradoxically, this is also everything very wrong with it. One really common comment I keep getting is that the fact that we don't know anything about Subaru or that the plot doesn't go anywhere doesn't matter because it's a character-driven story. This is, okay, if you've watched enough of my videos, you should know exactly what's wrong with this, but let me break it down for the less enlightened. Every story is a character-driven story. That's the entire point of stories. Stories are never, ever about the things that happen. Stories are about the characters they happen to. You might as well call it a words-driven story. Yes, great, you've identified the thing you need to make stories happen. And ReZero's characters are, how do I say this? Remember how I said it's very terrible, but also really well written? This is exactly what I'm talking about. There's this really fucking brilliant, self-aware episode where Emilia confronts Subaru about what he's doing and why the hell he's doing it. And Subaru has this moment of quiet introspection where he realizes that literally everything he's done up until this point has been a bunch of self-righteous bullshit, acting to help her, but really only helping himself.
私のために自分のためでしょ。
違う、
And if it took the story and pivoted to a different direction, it would have been pretty goddamn profound. Case in point, this is literally exactly what happens in Mushoku Tensei. But instead, it just immediately forgets about this and he goes back to doing self-righteous bullshit, and it's like, huh? What the fuck was that even for? But then it turns around and has literally the exact same profound, self-aware conversation again in season 2.
バカな奴らだってそう思ってたよ。こんな楽しいこと、俺と一緒にいなきゃ味わえないんだって。
Which is the point where I realized that this self-awareness wasn't a fucking fluke, as I sat there questioning out loud, why is the rest of this so shit? Which led to the kind of existential crisis that could only be solved with a masturbatory half-hour video essay on anime. So I'm not going to dwell on why this episode is good, because I think we can all just agree on that. I'm more interested in what this says about Subaru. Introducing his parents gives a really nuanced explanation for basically everything stupid and cliched about Subaru's character. His seemingly unrelated to anything attitude about giving up, his overuse of cool English, his overcompensation for his lack of confidence and self-respect. So my initial reaction to this was, what the fuck? It's literally aware of 100% of the things that annoy the fuck out of me about this anime, and yet it put them all in there. And it's because all of this shit stems from the prevalent idea that Subaru does not love himself and so keeps being toxic to himself, thinking that because he's worthless, he should keep suffering to save everyone. He doesn't give up, and he keeps shouting these dumbass quips because he sees everyone else as valuable, but not himself, meaning if he can keep trading in his worthless life for theirs, then he could scrape some semblance of value out of his pathetic existence.
俺に何が残るって言うんだよ。俺が使えるのは自分の命だけだ。
The story orienting itself around all this self-righteous bullshit is both what makes it really intelligent and really fucking terrible at the same time. Let's start with the easiest one to explain, which is ReZero's god-awful use of death. My biggest problem with ReZero is that death is meaningless, and I got a lot of comments on my last video on this, so clearly I did a horrible job of explaining this. But here's what I mean. Of course, death has meaning. Of course, it affects Subaru. That's not in question. But the problem is that it keeps trying to play death as the emotional trigger, and it just isn't. If we know Subaru's just going to die and reset the world again, if we know anyone who dies is just going to come back, we have no emotional attachment to death and we don't care about it. This does not mean it can't be meaningful. Obviously, there's meaning to be had in a story where you're constantly staring death in the face, and it's not like that isn't in there too. But so much of this meaning is just lost because ReZero thinks the more important part is the violent death itself, which it keeps playing up over and over and over again for raw shock value, which obviously falls flat after the first couple times. Like in this episode, he wakes up after a long period of wondering where everyone is, and it's covered in snow because of the passage of time, or some spell, or something else. This would be really intriguing if it didn't randomly have to show him getting violently and bloodily devoured. It's not even gross, it's worse. It's fucking boring because it's nothing we haven't seen a dozen times already. There's no reason to show us this. If this scene were cut right here, it would actually be more horrifying because it would leave the details of his fate up to the imagination. It wouldn't distract us from what we should be taking away from this scene, the apparent passage of time, and crucially, it wouldn't lose anything important. Instead, it has to commit to a full 20 seconds of horrible torture porn because it knows exactly what kind of edgy weeaboo this shit is supposed to appeal to. To clarify, I'm including Japanese people in my definition of weeaboos. I'll explain this in another video. Whereas fapping of a weeaboo has no such need for exaggerated theatrics. It's almost boring with how quiet it is in comparison. Mine has a goal and she's pursuing that goal. Me wants books. No books. It doesn't need to play up shocking death scenes because it's aware of every trigger the story is holding. In other words, it's comfortable being quietly meaningful, whereas ReZero seems like it feels the need to be loud in order to cover up for a lack of meaning, when in fact, it's this very loudness itself that is meaningless. But the weird part about ReZero is that this loud meaningless is the meaning. The horrible torture porn is how Subaru sees himself. He doesn't love himself, and he thinks if he just suffers more than everyone else, it'll all be okay. So he wants to suffer. He wants to be the tragic hero who takes the pain so no one else has to.
周りがどんな思いでいても一番辛いのは自分だって言い訳できるもの。
俺が悲劇の主人公ぶってるってのか。
So focusing on the horrible torture porn is actually kind of brilliant in a way. The suffering is completely gratuitous because, well, in the context of Subaru, he is. Subaru is the one who is trying to find meaning in meaningless deaths. So, in a way, being completely fucking meaningless makes it meaningful. Obviously, I still have problems with this, but keep this in mind as we talk about waifus. The problem with waifus in ReZero is that basically every single one of them talks in whatever way makes them the most waifu in that moment. To clarify, I'm not saying we shouldn't have hot waifus. Trust me when I say this, I get the waifu shit, I really do. But in ReZero, it's very often at the cost of personality. For example, Echidna. She's supposed to be this super powerful witch of greed who is able to screw with Subaru's mind. She's cunning, selfish, and seductive, yet surprisingly soft-spoken and compassionate, which we get to see in this scene where he's able to share with her his power and, finally, relieve the solitary burden of his existence in this world, returned by death. This scene would be extremely moving if she wasn't, for some goddamn reason, this entire time reacting bashfully to the most trivial shit this 17-year-old weeaboo says to her, like he's fucking Brad Pitt or some shit.
そうじゃなくてもお前を覚えていたい。
はい。
And if she wasn't also just randomly using the wrong pronoun. She definitely says boku because it's supposed to give her a specific type of waifu edge, but she's just not even a little bit written to fit the type of girl who uses boku. Specifically, a bokuko is the exact opposite of someone who would do this tsundere shit. Like, what the fuck? Now, I'm not saying you can't have waifu bullshit that does fit into the story. Like, that part where he forgets that the tea is made from her bodily fluids is legitimately funny.
忘れてた。
But the tsundere shit is just so randomly and blatantly waifu that it sucks you right out of every fucking scene with her every time it happens. And yeah, I know there's some weeb who's gonna be like, well, actually this is super deep and brilliant because blah 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 blah. No, shut the fuck up. You know just as well as I do that this was put in here for waifu purposes and it's really, really dumb and terrible. And this is with one of the characters with actual depth. Tell me, have you noticed that the characters without verbal tics are generally the important ones? Emilia doesn't have one, neither does Echidna besides the pronoun thing. It's because there isn't the need to hide the huge gaping void where personality should go with some annoying bullshit. Perhaps I was focusing too hard on trying to sound cynical in my video ripping off Yahtzee, but this is what I meant when I said ReZero would be a good anime if it literally cut out half the fucking dialogue. Some is okay, and honestly, not every character needs to be deep. I have an entire video on why Steins Gate is a masterpiece, because everyone but Okabe and Kurisu is a shallow cliche. But not only does ReZero have way too much of this, filling space with cliches instead of character development, but it tries to force in so many emotional moments with these non-existent personalities that even the legitimate emotional moments are undermined by all the terrible cliches. This is at its absolute worst when it cycles through the witches, and every one of them is just some banal, painfully tropey waifu cliche, and the dialogue just feels like it drags on and on forever.
激怒してるから憤慨してるんだからド発点をつく勢いなんだから一応名乗ってはおくけどね食べちゃいたくなるんですはって何ですかはってそれな失礼ってやつだぞ
This isn't dialogue, these are quips.
つまんない話しないでくださいね
This is basically what Steins Gate would be without all the layers of irony blending it together. A bunch of cringy weeaboos.
くれさってなだ。
ティーナも禁止
So then when all the witches gather together to get Subaru to love himself, which is one of the defining moments of Subaru's character, it falls flat because, well, for one, again, all of them are the cringiest, most annoying tropes just constantly quipping at the screen, but also because we don't know anything about the witch. Her saying I love you over and over and over again is disturbing, but then suddenly him dying and turning this around into an emotional scene just doesn't work because we don't know anything about her. We don't know her motivations, we don't know why she loves Subaru, we don't know why he's important to her, we don't know why she wants to save him, and so her spiel about him not loving himself and needing to not, again, be so goddamn self-righteous all the time, while absolutely true, falls short of meaningful because we have no idea why the fuck she even cares. We don't know why she cares, so we don't care about her. So why the fuck do I give a shit about her feelings about Subaru? Trying to ram in emotional connection with every random character without doing the legwork is the fastest way to undermine the emotional moments that did get the attention they deserve, although again, minus the waifu bullshit. What we're missing here is a reason to care. In Ascendance of a Weeaboo, after almost 2 seasons, Mine gets to peer back into her memories and her family and her mom, and she realizes how much she's been missing her. She loves her and is heartbroken that she will probably never see her again. But then she comes home where she's confronted with the conflicting reality that there is a family that loves her in the here and now. And the problem is, after a couple years and almost 2 seasons of the anime, we still don't quite have the full connection of a real family. For Mine, even after all this time, they're still not quite real. But she is to them. Their love is real, and so what kind of person would she be if she didn't at least try to return that love? We don't just feel this connection, we feel Mine's inner conflict between warmth and loneliness as she's caught between the 2 worlds. It's thoughtful and nuanced. Whereas in Re:Zero, characters just kinda die a couple times and that's horrifying, I guess? That's not real connection, that's a shortcut that only works on the kind of people who don't tire of shock value. But then, here's why this is weirdly brilliant. This is, again, all just a bunch of self-righteous bullshit from Subaru. He doesn't know why the witch gave him the power to return from death. He doesn't know who she is, he doesn't know why she loves him, and he doesn't know what he's even supposed to be saving her from, and yet, he swears he'll save her. What the fuck? Why? It's because, like the horrible torture porn, he wants to be the hero that saves everyone. He doesn't actually give a fuck about her. He just wants to be able to save everyone. Or rather, wants to be able to say he saved everyone. Because he thinks he's worthless, he feels that by saving everyone, he can salvage some value out of his worthless life. So, him trying to have all the feels with all the waifus, despite them being all stupid and waifu, honestly kind of fits in with this. They're all waifus he has to save. Was there really any connection between him and Beatrice? Was Rem's confession a little sudden for how strong it was? Who gives a fuck? Does he? Don't get me wrong, he fucking might, but maybe it's all just about him again. Think back to that scene with Emilia. What does she say to him? And same with the villains. The other big problem with the writing in Re:Zero is that basically all the villains are extremely flat, cartoonishly evil monsters that are hard to take seriously. I wasn't kidding when I said this dude looks like Jim Carrey's The Mask. He's just so exaggerated and hyper edgy all the time, to the point where you'd think it's supposed to be a joke, but no, it's not. Good villains need nuance. If they're just, ooh, bad guy do bad thing, you really don't give a fuck. Let's take a real easy example. In Infinity War, Thanos is an amazing villain because he's right. He's absolutely right. When he Thanoses the galaxy, people's lives do get better, just as he promised. What he's missing, however, is that other people are the very thing that make life worth living. So what good is it that you can live better and longer if half the people you know are gone? There's nuance. Not only does Thanos think he's fighting for good, he absolutely is, and it's the balance of these philosophies that make him interesting. And then in Endgame, he's literally just anti-Avengers puppet evildoer going around and trying to stop them. He's just evil, there's no nuance, and it's fucking shit. God, that movie sucks ass. Bringing it back to preeminence of a waifu for a quick second, who's the villain? Who's the bad guy? That's right. It's mine. It's her taking over this body, this person that they all know and love. And despite it not being her fault, she has to live with the consequences. When Rutsu confronts her, the only real answer she can give him is, "I'm sorry, but I'll still be your friend." When the high priest puts the crown on her, it's because she's the dangerous one. There isn't some arbitrary distinction between good and evil because that would be boring. We care because there isn't some blatantly evil fucker who likes eating people. The bad guy is mine. So, in ReZero, Jim Carrey's Damask over here is a fucking horrible villain because there's no nuance. There's no reason to care about anything he's doing other than he's trying to kill people, and killing is like bad and stuff. He's boring. Before anyone comments that he's explained in season 2, this doesn't make him not boring. That just makes him a boring villain with a mildly interesting backstory. Same with the whale, and the dogs, and the rabbits. And this is actually why Rem was a really interesting villain at the start of ReZero until it was like, haha, psych, Kurt's dogs and stuff. Sure, all of these things are supposedly tied into the witch somehow, but again, why the fuck does she care? We don't know. We literally don't know. We don't have a reason to care because we don't know why she cares. She's just there. You're probably like, we don't need to know about her yet. She's a mystery. That's the fucking point, so-called king of weeaboos. And yes, we do. A mystery is fine, great even, but if we don't have a reason to care about it, then it's no longer a mystery, but instead merely something we don't know about. Take Attack on Titan, for example. We don't know what they are or where they're coming from, but they have to find out because they're fucking eating them. And also it does start steadily giving us more information after the 3rd fucking episode. Whereas 2 seasons into ReZero, and all we really know about the witch is that she has something to do with Subaru and all the evil stuff is connected with her, and she's like evil and stuff, supposedly. Where is the motivation? Why do we care? Because she can kill him? Not only does this, again, not matter, and not only, again, do we not even know why Subaru matters, the motivation this creates is for him to not tell anyone. So basically, this has literally nothing to do with anything in the story, but if he just shuts the fuck up about it, we can just ignore it. Do you see how that's different? There isn't a real reason for us to care. There isn't even enough incentive for Subaru to ask her literally any question. Like, say, what is Return from Death? Or, why do you care? Or, who are you? Or even, what the fuck? No, instead, he merely vows he'll save her for some fucking reason. She doesn't matter. She's just there. Here's where you might be like, wait, we can have a looming mysterious evil that's only there for the sake of being evil. Lots of fantasy stories do this. Look at Lord of the Rings. Sauron is just evil, and that's true. Sauron is really vague and evil, but as far as the actual characters are concerned, the bad guy in Lord of the Rings isn't Sauron, it's the ring. The evil in Lord of the Rings isn't some super evil wizard, it's the corrupting presence of the ring. It's how each of the characters succumb to the lure of power and how it affects those around them. Men like Boromir are the first to go, but then he trumps over it in his last moments as he gives up his pride with his life. The thing everyone fears is not Sauron, but the corrupting power of the ring. There's nuance because we see this power grow over the course of the story as Frodo gets closer and closer to Mordor, and even he falls victim to its influence at the very end. In ReZero, not only is Subaru's corrupting influence by nature hidden from almost everyone but himself, all the physical villains are just, ooh, bad guy do bad thing, or in this case, bad dog do bad thing. But then again, you can probably guess what I'm gonna say next. That's right, this is how Subaru sees the world. He's giving up his life in horribly painful endings to cartoonishly evil villains to save all the waifus. And with this in mind, then, just like in Afterlife of a Wanker, the true villain here is Subaru. He's struggling against himself because he doesn't love himself. It all comes back to this self-righteous bullshit he's doing as an excuse for not loving himself. Why is the show crammed with so much gratuitous torture porn? Self-righteous bullshit. Why are all the waifus so stupid and waifu? Self-righteous bullshit. Why are all the villains so cartoonishly evil? Self-righteous bullshit. Why does Subaru think being loud is the same thing as being emotional? You fucking guessed it.
Oh, please don't love me.
So now's the part of the video where you're probably like, wait, if you put all this time into explaining how it's actually kinda genius, why do you hate it? Does this not explain away all of the problems you have with ReZero? And yeah, kind of, but here's the thing. Well, first, if you're the kind of weeb who enjoys the campy bullshit that ReZero revolves around, this is almost certainly your favorite anime of all time, and I respect that. I do. Or if you're the kind of person that just enjoys really sick animation with a lot of spectacle, this is probably just really solid to you, and honestly, that's fucking fair. Not everything has to be so goddamn intellectual all the time. But for me, two things. No, actually, three things. Number one is it doesn't matter how deep it is. If it uses a lot of dumb bullshit to tell its story, that doesn't make it good. That makes it a deep story with a lot of dumb bullshit. A complete lack of nuance being the nuance, well, technically brilliant, isn't exactly what I'd personally call good storytelling, but maybe that's just me, I don't know. Number two is that this approach only goes so far because the story doesn't revolve around Subaru. It's more about all of the shit happening around Subaru because we still have no idea why the fuck Subaru is there or why he's even important to the story and the world at large. He's just there. If Subaru really was the center of this story, we'd be having a completely different conversation right now. But in most of the story, not all of it, but most of it, he's the vehicle for the plot, not the plot itself. It's a subtle but very important difference. So then number three is it all comes back to the bad Isekai test, which it fails. By design, for sure, but it fails really, really hard. Now again, you might be like, wait, if this entire thing is about Subaru and his self-righteous bullshit, doesn't this mean it actually passes this test? And sort of. He's a nobody who selfishly makes himself the protagonist of his own story, so it passes question one, kind of, maybe, but then it undermines this with all the dumb bullshit. Let's say the jury's out on this one, but also, remember, the point is that he doesn't matter, so it still handily fails question number two. So what does this all mean? Why would I go on a huge rant to explain why a story that I personally think is shit is actually super deep and meaningful? Who the fuck would do that? What am I even saying? Am I saying that the author is a genius who came up with a brilliant story about self-respect, but deliberately wrote it kind of badly because the average weeaboo cares more about hot waifus and exciting isekai fantasy than intelligent, nuanced characters? That weebs might relate more to a blank everyman protagonist who's so ordinary he's literally isekai'd on his way back from the convenience store, who doesn't have any real superpowers but still manages to succeed anyway if he just doesn't give up and gets surrounded by an alarming amount of waifu bullshit, that our entire reason for caring about Subaru is external to the story at hand because that makes him more relatable by design? Whoa, cup noodles! I also eat cup noodles! I'm a weeaboo! You're probably wondering what the fuck this even has to do with Ascendance of a Weeaboo anymore. Let me ask you this. If I absolutely hated Ascendance of a Bookworm, would I be able to talk nearly as much shit on it as I just did with ReZero? No, I wouldn't, and that's really the core problem with ReZero. First, if you're a fan of ReZero, you've probably only listened to the part where I said I don't like it. Have fun ranting in the comments. But the point I'm trying to make is that what gets lost in all of the bullshit that makes up ReZero's story is the one thing a story needs: a reason to care. Each little thing wrong with ReZero is a loose thread, pulling it in a million different directions, and while its core foundation, as I hope I've made clear, is nothing short of fucking brilliant, pull on too many threads and the whole thing unravels. The reason I like Ascendance of a Weeaboo better is because, despite all of its faults, it's really, really focused. Remember, me want books, no books. We literally don't know anything else about Mine, but we know exactly where her head is every single step of the way. It's this single-mindedness of the plot that makes it work. It's not about some power fantasy. In fact, she's weak as fuck. It's not about some crazy high fantasy concepts, although they're there eventually. Theoretically, she's the strongest magic user, but it takes so long to get there that it's basically irrelevant. Mine has a problem to solve, and she goes about solving it, and everything else in the story is secondary. Whereas in ReZero, it's about everything revolving around Subaru, and Subaru himself is secondary. Again, yes, kind of the point, but that doesn't make this not true. Ascendance of a Weeaboo should be the anime that all other isekai are judged by because it's so goddamn simple. No, it's not my favorite anime ever, not even close. But I like it because it knows exactly what kind of story it is, and it can't fail in all the ways ReZero does because it never tries to be anything other than that story. It's always ready to pass the bad isekai test because the answers to the questions why mine and why isekai are seeping through its every pore. Because those two questions are literally the only thing the story is ever about. Why mine? Me want books. Why isekai? No books. You literally cannot get any simpler. So if this helped you understand isekai a little more, do me a favor and step on the like button, and consider subscribing for more galaxy brain weeaboo takes. And if for some reason you'd like to hear me take the piss out of isekai a little more, check out my video plagiarizing zero punctuation. But for everyone else, you might get more out of my video on why everything you think you know about Gundam is a lie. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, friends, and I will see you in the next video.